I know it said that I might do some stand-up, but forget that. I'm just going to do some storytelling. And I'm going to tell a couple of short vignettes about my grandfather on my mom's side, who's, I guess when I think about it, he's the kind of guy who always has the right intentions when he does stuff, but always does it the wrong way. If my family was, a sitcom family, my grandfather would do something, and we'd all look at him and we'd just say, "Harry!" And he'd just kind of, "What are you doing?" And I think the first time that I realized that this is just kind of his personality was when I was probably 5 or 6, and my grandfather was visiting over Christmas, and we had a hot tub at my house, which is, awesome when you live in Michigan, like I do, and so we decided to go get in the hot tub, and we run out, and we obviously have to, get in your bathing suit first, and then run out into the snow, and then jump in the hot tub. So we're already pretty cold, and we get in, and it's great, it's nighttime, it's snowing, and my grandfather, as people are wont to do to 6-year-old kids, asks me what I want to be when I grow up. I don't know how many people heard it as well, but my entire family on my mom's side is very, very loud. They're very well known for it. And my mom has 3 siblings, so there's a lot of them, and they're all just the loudest people. There's a recording that my grandfather made somewhere in the family from the 70s, I believe, of their dinner table conversation, and it's just white noise. It is unintelligible because they're all talking at the same time. So we're sitting there, and my grandfather's like, he's like, "Noah, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And at the time, I was really into National Geographic, and I loved the pictures. The pictures was my favorite part. So I wanted to be a National Geographic photographer. As, every kid at age 6 has some unrealistic goal. Mine was National Geographic photographer. So I tell my grandfather, I'm like, "I want to be a National Geographic photographer, Grandpa," And my grandfather's really into finance and money and business. So instead of just saying, "Oh, that's great, kiddo," he looks at me and he says, "No, that'll never do. You should be a businessman or a professor or a lawyer." And at age 6, I was crushed. I was completely heartbroken. It was a no, that kind of moment. It was just the worst. Probably the most recent example of my grandfather totally screwing up the situation was right after I came out of the closet to my family. And my mom is not good at keeping secrets. So she was on the phone with my grandparents. They're doing a conference call sort of thing. My grandfather, whenever you call my grandfather, it's like a 3-hour affair because he just talks constantly. Doesn't matter what's going on in his life. He always has, 3 hours of material to talk about. So he's got going on, on the phone. He's like, "Finance, business, blah, blah, blah," And in the middle of his sentence, my mom just kind of blurts out, "Noah's gay." And I'll point out that my grandfather's hearing is just crap. He cannot hear, and he has convinced himself that hearing aids cost $5,000 a piece per ear, and Medicare will not pay for them, so he refuses to buy them. So he doesn't hear it at all. So he just keeps going with whatever he's talking about for like another couple minutes, and then finally my mom's like, "Did you guys hear what I said?" And my grandmother, who's been quiet the whole time, just kind of pipes up and is like, "Oh, I heard." But, my grandparents were cool with it, they love me, whatever, so it wasn't really a big deal. And this was probably a couple days after that happened. My grandparents live at my house in the summer, so they were staying with us, and I had a friend who was a girl come over, and we were just, sitting on the couch and talking, and my grandfather loves talking to people about what they want to do with their lives, what their future careers are going to be, So he asked my friend, he's like, "Hello, nice to meet you. which I guess is a pretty common theme with my grandfather. So he sits down and he's chatting with my friend a little bit. At one point he says, "You're a very pretty girl. You could change this one sexual ori." And he realizes that that's really offensive. So he just very slowly tries to keep from, that whole math thing where you split half by half by half and it never touches? That's where I felt that sentence was going. It was like a slow-mo car crash. It was not going in a good direction. Finally, I just have to say, it's okay. I understand you're not a homophobe. It's cool, right? And probably the biggest and craziest thing my grandfather has ever done came to light when my family decided to take a trip out to New York. And like I said, we're from Michigan. And the quickest way to get to New York from Michigan is to go through Canada, right? And I will preface this by saying I was really excited. I have never left the U.S. And this was, I've gone to Niagara Falls before, and I've seen other countries. My parents were like, look, it's pretty much just like America. They have trees and buildings, but I was pumped. I didn't care, it's another place. I'm gonna go eat poutine, whatever. So, we get to the border, and this was right when they changed the law in Canada, or between, I guess, US and Canada, that you had to have a passport to get into the country. And my parents just completely blanked on this. And so we drive up to, the border patrol, and my parents are just like, we forgot our passports. But as I said, my grandparents live with us in the summer, so they were back at our house. So they were like, do you think we could just fax you passports? Is that good enough? And they were like, well, you have to go talk to the embassy or whatever. So we drive over, and this is disputed, but I think we were technically in Canada, went to the other side. So I like to pretend I've actually been there. And we go up to the embassy woman, who's like a police officer lady with a thick mustache. It was kind of Frida Kahlo-esque, you know what I mean? And we explain, we forgot our passports, we can fax them, blah, blah, blah. And she goes in the back room and does something for 10 minutes. I don't really know what would take 10 minutes, we're like 4 people. But she comes back out and she says, "I'm sorry, I can't let you into the country." And then she points at my mom and she says, "Except for you, Nita Nikolai, welcome back to Canada." And my mom looks at her, she's like, I'm not Canadian. I think there's a mistake or something. And my mom, when she was a kid, they lived in the eastern side of Michigan, which is really, really close to Canada. And this was, the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, when the Cold War was a really big deal. And my grandfather was very paranoid about the Cold War. And unlike a normal person who might, look up the local nuclear war shelter or whatever, my grandfather just got his whole family Canadian citizenship. And then he forgot that he had gotten his whole family Canadian citizenship. So, for 30 years, my whole family on my mom's side have technically been Canadian citizens, and they were not aware. So, we get back in the car, we're driving, back down to go to New York, and my mom is a high school teacher, so she does not swear. But she pulls out her cell phone and she dials my grandfather's number. She puts the phone and she's like, "We're Canadian? What the fuck?" I remember as a kid, I was like, whoa, she just swore! She just dropped the F-bomb! That's crazy! It's actually, in some ways, it's a little unfortunate, because for a very long time, I didn't realize what a great person my grandfather was. I didn't really appreciate him. I like to think that I had maybe some more reasons other than the whole ruining my childhood dream. I don't want to pretend that I held a grudge for 10 years over somebody telling me I couldn't have my 6-year-old dream job, but that was probably a factor. And we also just didn't agree on a lot of things politically, and I was kind of like a hippie flower child, so, you know, it's like, there's no justification for ever cutting down a tree. And like I said, my grandfather is very business-minded, so, you know, he was pretty much like, ends justify the means. But as I grew up, as I became a teenager, I started to see him in a different light. And I saw that, you know, everything my grandfather did, even if the end result was, you know, his whole family was Canadian, had a very, he had a good reason. It was either that he was concerned about his family, or that he wanted to get to know his grandchildren better, or that he wanted them to be happy and have a good future. And he was always just trying to do the best he could, you know. And I guess that culminated this summer. I was, you know, at home and I was getting ready to go to college, and my grandparents, they migrate south. It's kind of like birds in the winter. And they go to Texas to live with the other half of my mom's family. So, you know, they were sitting around, and my grandfather was explaining to me that he couldn't come and visit this school year, but he was really excited because what he wanted to do was come next year, sleep on my floor in my dorm room, and then go to class with me the next day. That's what he really wanted to do. And, you know, I was a little bummed out that he wouldn't be able to come visit me, but, you know, it was all right. And as my I'm sitting down in a chair, just, you know, by the way. And as my grandfather walks past me, he kind of, it's not really half Nelson, but he grabs my head, like my head's right here, right? And so he grabs me like that, and he just kind of says, "I love you!" And, you know, I mean, it was a lot more heartfelt than that, but, you know, for all the stuff that my grandfather screwed up, he got that thing very, very right. Thank you.